This is the multiple award-winning GardenDC podcast, the podcast about everything gardening in the Washington, D.C. and Mid-Atlantic region. I'm your host, Kathy Jentz. I'm the editor of Washington Gardener magazine. Our content is aimed at gardening enthusiasts, people who grow everything, from edibles to ornamentals, natives to exotics. If it grows in our area, that's what we talk about. Welcome to episode 237 of the GardenDC podcast. In this episode, we talk with Wendy Brister, marketing director of Cavanaugh Perennials, all about native edible plants. The plant profile is on Basket of Gold, and we share what's going on in the garden, as well as some upcoming local gardening events in the What's New segment. We close out with the last word on Playing with Frost by Christy Page of Green Prints. This episode, we're joined by Wendy Brister. She's the marketing director at Cavanaugh Perennials in Kingsville, Maryland. Welcome back, Wendy.
Hi, Kathy. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you back on the GardenDC podcast. So I looked up the last time we had you, and it was way back, September 2020, one of our first year's episodes, and we talked to you all about preserving your harvest, canning, freezing, and drying.
See a food theme coming through here, huh?
Yeah, so I was like, well, even though I think one of your specialties, of course, is native plants and perennials, I feel like we come back to you for those good edible topics.
That's all right. It's all good.
So what's been going on with you in the last 4 to 5 years?
Well, we made it through COVID, which was great. And now we're trying to get back to normal in the horticulture industry. And so far, so good. There's lots of great plants out there, and we're bringing lots of great plants back to the market that might have fallen out. And I think edibles fall into that. Ever since COVID, people have been more into growing their own food. And I think native edibles hold a really valuable place in that niche.
Yeah, that's a great point. And when you say have fallen out of the market, so for a time, people weren't buying certain categories or as much of certain plants?
There's always some things that just in a production nursery like we are at Cavanaugh's, our suppliers, for whatever reason, may stop producing certain plants or different things. And it may be because one plant's not as easy to produce as cost effectively as another. So, over time, some things fall out and we just can't get them. But we've kind of made an effort here at Cavanaugh's that if there's some really good garden plants, we'll do what we can, even if it means in-house propagation, to get some of those things back on the market.
And can you give an example of one of those that you're bringing back this year?
Well, probably more of a category would be like rock garden type plants. And it's a lot of easy stuff that can easily be grown from seed. It's straight species or really simple seed cultivars. And they just I personally haven't seen a lot of this stuff since when I first started 20 some years ago. And over time, some of the nurseries that were growing them large scale just faded away. So we picked up on that the past couple years and have some really neat alpine rock garden, super well drained type plants.
Yeah, and I'm hearing more and more about gravel gardening choices and rock gardening. So I think you guys are right on the cusp of that, and that's great to hear.
Yep.
So our topic for the episode today is native edibles, and those are our native plants mainly for the Mid-Atlantic region that we're going to be talking about. And of course, if you're listening from outside the Mid-Atlantic United States, some of these might be native to your area, but not all of them, because native, of course, is relative.
That's right. It is.
And let's talk a little bit first also about that edible aspect. So maybe some safety precautions.
Yes. Whenever I talk natives, especially native edibles, I'd like to throw out that word of caution. Even though you see something in a book or see something in a talk, make sure you're really confident what you find. If you find something in the wild, that it's a 100% sure ID, because the last thing I want is anybody to get sick. I tend to talk about, the more obvious ones so that it's a little safer for folks. But with anything, there's always a risk that somebody could have an adverse reaction. And when we get to some of these plants, I'll share, I've personally had some adverse reactions and other people eat them just fine. So It's like anything you ingest.
Yeah. I think, that's a big point, Wendy, is that we all have allergies and sensitivities. And
Right.
if it's something new to your body that you've never tried before, maybe just do a tiny taste to see your reaction first. And then, as you said, make 100% sure of your ID. You want to know that that is what you're actually eating.
And the other thing too, my word of warning, it's always much safer when you harvest some of these things from your own garden. When you're harvesting from the wild, you don't know what kind of chemicals could have been applied. You don't know what the soil contaminants might be in the area. So while foraging is hugely popular right now, do it with caution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You want to be able to raise the plants yourselves. You know what inputs you put in the soil. You know what inputs you might have put on the plants. So that's a great point. And I'd love to see, out of this episode, people even starting a whole edible native garden, just edible natives. Wouldn't that be a fun theme to have?
It is. And actually, the idea has been around for a long time. It's sort of the basis, not necessarily the truly native piece of it, but the edible perennial garden is one of the foundations of permaculture. And food forests have been around for a long time. The popularity comes and goes because it's not a low maintenance type garden, but it definitely has a lot of value.
Yeah, and a lot of the plants we're going to be talking about in this episode are ones that you're already growing, probably. You just didn't know you could eat them, or that certain parts of them can be eaten, or at certain times of year.
That's right. Yep.
Well, let's dive in, and we'll start with the perennials. So
okay.
The first on our list are the ramps. So they're in the allium family.
That's right. They're your typical onion type plant. You break the leaf and it smells like an onion. It smells like that wild garlic you get in your yard. But ramps have a wider leaf. Their leaf blade is pretty flat and it's a good inch across. They recently got a lot of press because a lot of fine dining restaurants have picked up on them and they've been collecting them in the wild, for restaurant use. And so that's a big concern with any wild harvested plant, is that you over harvest. But they are trying to get them into more production so that we're not collecting them from wild spaces. The people who are harvesting are being more responsible about it and only doing a portion of what's out there. But they've made some of the food magazines, some different recipes that you can do with ramps. But my favorite is probably grilling them. I think that's one of the tastiest, and then you put them on a salad.
Nice. Yeah, I've heard that same publicity too. Ramps are expensive, and they're treated like a gourmet onion, garlic usage for a lot of recipes. And I've heard of people going into our local native parks and stealing them. Please don't do that. And you can grow your own.
That's right. Yeah. And they're slow to make up. That's one of the reasons they are pricey. They're slow to grow from seed is another reason. Fortunately, there are some producers in the Mid-Atlantic. They're not large producers, but some of your more hobby greenhouses are growing them. So they are available, and they're available mail order for sure. So there's ways to get them, and the deer don't eat them.
Yes, I was going to say one of the great things about them is they can grow in part shade, correct? And they're not eaten by deer and bunnies.
That's right. That's right.
So next on our list is the wild strawberry. And there are many different native strawberries in our region. And of course, there's the regular culinary ones that we buy and import, the little plants. But this is the particular one.
Yeah, and I put this on with a little bit of, it may be more native, it may not. But a lot of the research I've done shows that there is one that also is very similar to a European one, but it was found in the United States. And they're not the big culinary strawberries. They're little tiny ones. This isn't necessarily the weedy wild strawberry that grows through your lawn that is a weed. It's probably a little bigger than that. But if you want something just charming and a little bit different, it's a nice one to try. My fallback is the big culinary, the normal traditional strawberries. Because if you're doing any preserving or anything with large quantities, that's the way to go. But if you're looking for a simple ground cover, it's a great thing to do. And also the wild strawberries are a host plant for one of our native bees. So that's another great reason to grow this in your garden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I recommend this as an edible ground cover in my ground cover book. And this is the Frigeria vesca, subspecies americana, that we're talking about. And the weedy one you talked about that pops up sometimes in lawns, it's a little round kind of thing with little bumpies on it. That one is flavorless pretty much.
Yep. And with these, because they haven't been over hybridized, they're not going to be the big, sweet, juicy ones you're used to. So you just have to think about it a little differently.
Mm-hmm. And that's a really cute thing to toss on top of, your cereal, or as you said, a salad. So, or on a cupcake.
That's right. That's right.
So our next edible is the ostrich fern. So I'm imagining it's not the full-grown fern wand we're going to eat. It's probably that fiddlehead.
That's right. It's the fiddlehead. And this is another one like the ramps that has gained some popularity in some of the foodie magazines. Grilled fiddleheads are sort of a delicacy for the spring, mainly because you can only harvest them at certain times of year. Like we're in that window right now in Maryland and PA. That they're just starting to emerge, and you really only have a few days in that window when you can harvest them because you want to get them when they're tight, and you saute them in some butter on a skillet and they're wonderful. But what isn't wonderful? Sauteed in butter.
Yeah, I was going to say, throw a little bit of garlic in there or some of your cut up ramps. Yum, yum. And yeah, anything sauteed in butter. Of course, we want to pause here and say, don't harvest all your fiddleheads because you want some of those ostrich ferns still in your garden. But if you have ostrich fern and it's happy, you probably have enough. Yeah, you probably have plenty to spare. Or you can ask around to a gardening friend, do you have ostrich fern and could you spare some?
Right. And again, with this, not all fern fiddleheads are edible. So the ostrich is a safer one. Some people do try some of the others, but I would stick with ostrich fern.
Yeah, and there has been some precaution about cancer-causing chemicals in some of the ferns, but at a very small, you're only going to eat it this once a year, this one window, and you're not eating canned fiddleheads all year long in all your dishes. I think is probably safe at this small serving size. And so another rampant grower in the garden once it's happy, just like ostrich fern, would be the Jerusalem artichoke.
Yes. Now this is probably the most rampant of any of the plants that I talk about. It's a beautiful plant in the garden. It's in the sunflower family. And it's a late bloomer. So if you want this really incredible, tall yellow flower in late summer and early fall, sunchokes are a great garden addition, but they do spread. You want to give them plenty of room. The good thing with that is it doesn't matter how many you harvest, you will never lose them. So that's a positive. But these can easily tower 8 feet. So it's not for the faint of heart. They're a big plant. Many years ago, I come from a farming background, and back in the East, there was an initiative to, get this into a more streamlined food stock. And they were talking with some of the farmers to try to get them to start growing these. But the problem was they were just so aggressive. And a lot of times your traditional grain farmers or even produce farmers aren't used to that perennial habit of some of these plants. So it was a real hard one to get it established. But now there's a lot of backyard growers that are doing them. And the best time, what you're actually going to eat on this is the tuber. So we're not eating the top of the plant. That's just for show. And we want to dig it usually after the first frost because that's when a lot of the sugars start to settle in and it's more flavorful. And with this one, you can use them like a potato, so you can cut them up. I've had them before where they're like mashed and eaten that way. I've had them in soups, different things. But with them, you want to do it in moderation because while it's not going to make you sick or anything, Jerusalem artichokes are known to produce a lot of gas. So I've heard that time and time again that, you can't eat too many of these. But the benefit of eating them, I have read some reports that they are helpful for diabetics because it helps regulate your sugar a little bit. It's a starch that doesn't really affect diabetics too much. But there again, you have to weigh the pros and cons.
Yeah, and people might know them under another name like sunchoke. You'll see them sometimes at the farmer's market in baskets that way. And I agree with you. They can cause stomach distress, and try a little bit to start. So I've had them in as a substitute in a potato salad. Perfectly good, really tasty, but yeah, you want to know your reaction first. So
yeah. And one thing with all of these, they're very seasonal. So sunchokes or Jerusalem artichokes don't hold for a very long time. Generally, I'll just dig them as I need them. I won't store them, but they can mush once they're harvested and held, for too long out of the ground.
Yep. So good tip, keep them in the ground and have them when you need them.
Mm-hmm.
And so our next perennial native edible is the Monarda or bee balm.
Right, and this probably goes along further on the list is mountain mint. And both of these I put on mainly because they make really good tea. And you brew them just like you would brew any other tea, but they both have very distinct flavors. One time over the summer, I actually did a tea tasting with some of these different ones, and it was very interesting to see the different color profiles they produced as well as the different flavor profiles. And the mountain mint can tend to be a little more bitter. Sometimes I've found some of the bee balms are a little sweeter, but it's all personal preference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think many people have had it as bergamot in their Earl Grey, Lady Grey, those type of mixed teas. That's personally my favorite tea is Lady Grey, so I love it. But I have not done my own mixing with, let's say, a black tea and Monarda from my own garden.
Yeah, it's fun to do. And then, or even mix with a lemonade can be fun just for something a little different. Mm-hmm. And then you can throw some violet flowers or something in the mix to make it pretty. So there's all kinds of fun natural teas you can make.
And with the mountain mint, the Pygmanthemum muticum, that's any of the mountain mints. So there's like narrow leaf mountain mint. Yep. There's taller, skinnier mountain mints. There's different ones. They, when you crush leaves, you get that release of that fresh minty scent. And again, we should have that little asterisk on there, deer resistant for both the bee balm and mountain mint because of those strong aromatics in there. But with mountain mint, you just pour boiling water over and you just have a mint tea right there.
Exactly.
Have you ever used mountain mint in other recipes or usage in cooking?
No, I haven't. Mainly I stick to it with teas, but that doesn't mean you couldn't. Now, I have seen some data that if you're pregnant, you might want to avoid the pygmanthemums. So there again, just read up a little bit before you do some of these. The Monarda, I haven't seen as many things, but then like you mentioned, you see that commercially in different teas and different supplements and things. So that's probably a little safer, but the pygmanthemum, occasionally I'll see some documentation that you do want to watch who eats that.
That's a good precaution. So next on our list is arrowhead or Sagittaria latifolia, which means big leaf pretty much. And that's an aquatic plant. Some of us know it as duck potato.
That's right. And probably the reason it got the name duck potato is the edible portion again is that tuber, which sort of is reminiscent of a potato. You don't eat the leaves. But this is a neat one, just if you are doing aquatic gardening. It's an easy one, and it's a plant that can spread pretty well once it's happy in your pond. So why not take it out and harvest it and try it?
Yeah, I keep mine because I have such a small little water garden, just like a 9-foot oval. I keep it in a container and definitely use it just for decorative purposes. It has a nice little flower wand it sends up, and it can reseed itself a bit.
Yes, it can. It can.
And form large colonies if you let it. If you have
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's kind of nice if you are dividing that container, then you can always, take a tuber out and try it and you're not losing anything. So again, there are a lot of these edibles that are harvested and eaten like potatoes. It's a very common thing to use them as a starch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this one was a favorite of Native Americans, especially because you can get to it most of the year that it's available to you. Mm-hmm. So next is our giant Solomon seal, and that is the one that I think that grows over 6 feet tall, not the little 3-foot one that we have a lot in our garden.
Right, it can, and it's not as common to find, but this is another one we don't want to wait till it gets to that massive height. This one you want to harvest when it's first coming out of the ground. And while I haven't tried this firsthand, people I've talked to said it tastes like asparagus. And you're harvesting it while it's still tight before it really unfurls. So it's just something different. And it grows just as aggressively as a lot of the other Solomon seals. So it's one of those that if you take a few stems, you're really not going to miss them.
Yep. Yeah. And I was going to say that as we're recording it, now is the time.
Yeah,
to get
now
some
is
of
the
it.
time.
Yeah.
We might even be a little late depending on how warm you are. Now, I have read some things too that some people do eat the tubers underground. Any of the literature I've read, the preference would be the young foliage, but that's not to say you can't try the tubers either.
And then we're also talking about just the giant variety, or do you think that the common Solomon seal?
Well, I've seen it listed as commutatum and biflorum, so it could easily probably go either way. The hard thing with some of these is some of the literature you read, the foraging literature, they don't always get into the species. So that's where some of it's a little bit up in the air.
Yeah. So I would say the young shoots, comparable to asparagus, and then, as you said, the starchy rhizomes. But definitely, again, make sure it's the real Solomon seal that you're talking about.
Right. And I would not go after your variegated ones, the Asian varieties. Stay away from those.
So next on the list is sweet goldenrod, the Solidago odora, and there are lots of different goldenrods, of course, in our garden, but this one, the sweet one in particular.
Yeah, this one, a lot of herbalists I know or foragers will use this again in a tea, and some of them claim that it has really great, not necessarily antiviral, but it just helps with your overall health and well-being. So they'll mix them, whether they use them with like a Monarda or a mountain mint, or they'll forage other things that are high in antioxidants and make sort of this wellness tea. And it can be, I've seen them use some of the flowers, I've seen them use the leaves. So it's kind of nice that it can be used, throughout the year. The reason it's called sweet goldenrod is it does have those sweeter notes to it. And I also like this one for a garden better because it's a clump forming goldenrod. And it's not one that's going to eat your garden, which is always a good thing when you have a small space.
Yeah, that's always good. And if you're just harvesting some of those flowers for the tea or that sort of thing, you're not going to have it spread all over.
That's right.
So next is another sweet flower, and that's violet, our native violas.
Yeah, I think these are one of the more accepted edibles. You'll see these from some of the markets. Locally, we have this hydroponic vegetable grower near us, and they sell nasturtiums and violet flowers, and they sell these lovely clear clamshells to you, and it's beautiful. So that's a little more on the commercial edge, I think. But they make beautiful jellies. That purple flower, infuses into jellies really well. I've seen them used in salads, in ice cream, you can float them in your punch bowls and they're edible. So it's a really great addition in the spring when they're blooming, to throw violet flowers out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love using violets in a simple syrup, in cocktails, or you can use them, mix them with a lemonade. It's really pretty, and kind of do that layering in, your drink. That's always fun.
Yeah.
And yeah, but don't pick them all because it is the host plant for our fritillary butterflies.
That's right. Yeah. So like everything, you want to make sure you leave some for the critters.
But, if you have a good stand of it, thick little meadow, you can go a little bit crazy.
Right. That's right.
And pick a bunch. Yeah, just for coloring and fun. And they're so sweet. And I would describe it as kind of a fruity grape taste.
Yes, I agree. But that color is just incredible. You can't really match it with much else.
So those were the perennials. Do you have any additions to the perennial category?
Well, I know there's some plants that like some of the Native Americans might have used are native spirabolus, prairie drop seed. They used as a grain. Some of that I don't have any experience with, but there's lots of sites out there now. One of the great authors that I always referenced was Eric Tonesmeyer, and he wrote a book called Paradise Lot, and he was up in New England and turned his little 1/8 of an acre backyard into this food forest with a lot of native edibles and non-native edibles, but focusing on things that would return year after year. So he has a lot of great examples.
Great. Let's go on to some other categories of plants. And how about the vines?
The vines are a lot of fun. There's two in particular that I'm really fond of. One is Apios, which is our ground nut, and the second one is Maypop, which is one of our passion flower vines. So we'll start with the Maypop. That's probably a little more common. It is hardy to zone 7. So especially south of the Mason-Dixon line. You should be able to find it, and it'll come back year after year. Now, with a lot of vines, they grow fast. That's just sort of a vine habit, and maypops will do that. I've seen, massive growth, but what you're going to eat is actually the fruit that comes after the flower. And it's this little round, almost kiwi size shaped fruit, but it's not fuzzy. It's smooth and light green. And the fruit inside is what you would scoop out and eat. The key is squirrels and other wildlife love them. So it's getting them before the wildlife does. But regardless, it's a great plant. It's pretty. It has a really nice flower in the summer. And it's an easy one. And grow it up on a trellis. You can have the little fruits hang down above your head. It's an easy way to harvest.
Yeah. I find a lot of people never get it to the fruit stage, and I think it's because they're either not getting it to grow high enough to get into enough sun. They might have some sporadic flowering, or maybe it's the variety that they're growing.
Yeah, and that's key. It needs good sunlight to flower, and if you don't get the flowers, you're not going to get the fruit. But regardless, even if you don't, it's a great vine. It'll quickly shade an area for you. It fills in quickly. So you just have to manage it a little bit and make sure it goes where you want it to go. But on the flip side of that, then talking about the apios, that's more of a well-behaved vine. And that's also one that's harder to find. You can get it through mail order sources. But I love it because it's a fall blooming vine. So aside from the fact that you can eat the tubers on it, it gets this beautiful, almost burgundy flower that reminds me of a wisteria, but it happens in the fall. And it's not an aggressive vine. It totally dies back to the ground every winter. And so it's very light as far as weight. It doesn't have a lot of woody stems. So you don't need a heavy structure to support it, but it's actually in the pea family. So in addition to being edible for us, it's nitrogen fixing. So we get that added benefit too. And after the flower, you do get these little peas that form. Now, for me in central PA, that happens really late. So they don't ever develop into anything. But farther south, you might actually get more development. And I believe the pea pods are edible as well. But I've never been able to try them because we don't have quite as long of a growing season.
Yep.
But what I have tried are the little underground tubers. And these are said to have more protein than a potato. They're supposed to have a lot of nutritional value. And they're kind of fun just because they look like little beads on a chain. Like you'll have these tubers form on a root, and then there'll be a skinny root, and then another one will pop up. And they just sort of string along. And once you dig them up, they can travel underground. You can be pulling roots up for like 10, 15 feet away from the crown of your plant and find these ground nuts. So it's kind of fun. If you're really doing it for serious food harvesting, you'd probably want to grow it in a really large contained area so that you could access these a little better. But for just backyard growing, I have mine, and they've rooted into my kids' playground, so they're growing in playground mulch and really light, airy stuff, so they're easy to pull up.
Yep. And that's the Apios americana groundnut, which has many common names, and I think even groundnut, some people will call a peanut a groundnut, because it literally is. But this is the American groundnut, or a potato bean, hopness. Yeah. I've heard Indian potato, and then referring to that beautiful burgundy color cinnamon vine, because there's not anything cinnamony about it, really. I think that's referring to that red-brown color.
Yes, exactly. But probably the reason you don't find this available at a lot of garden centers is because in a container, it's not going to look very fancy. Mm-hmm. It's one of those real wiry, spindly vines in a pot. It's hard to get it to trellis like a clematis would. So it's just not as visually appealing, to that you want to buy it off a garden center bench. So you really have to go after and look for it. But you can find them.
Yep. Yeah, and I do note that they are also long storing the tubers. So if you have somebody who is growing a groundnut, it's an easy pass-along plant. All you need is one of those tubers to start.
That's right. Yep, that's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. It's a fun thing because now I've had mine for probably 10 or 15 years. And when I get tours that come to the garden, if they've sprouted up at new spots, I just hand over a trowel and be like, here, take a piece home. So you're right. It's the best pass-along plant.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
Get low-maintenance alternatives to lawns with Ground Cover Revolution by Kathy Jentz. Reducing the lawn is among the biggest trends in homeownership, with an endless stream of homeowners looking for an eco-friendly alternative to a traditional turfgrass lawn. In the last few years alone, over 23 million Americans converted part of the lawn to a natural landscape, and now they're looking to do even more. The biggest challenge to adopting this new ideal of the perfect lawn? Knowing how and when to replace your turf and which plants are the best ones for the job. Ground Cover Revolution is here with you all the answers you need, and some you didn't even know you needed. Included are 40 in-depth profiles of plants that are perfect choices for replacing a grass lawn. There are options for sun, for shade, for dry and wet sites, and for various climates around the globe. There are choices that bloom, options that are evergreen, and selections that are deer-resistant. Kathy Jentz has also included an incredibly useful chart that gives you all the specifics on each of the 40 choices for quick reference and to make your ground cover selection process even easier. Whether you want to replace the entire lawn or just reduce the amount of land dedicated to turf, Ground Cover Revolution will help you usher in a new and improved idea of what a beautiful lawn should be. Ground Cover Revolution is available now wherever you buy books, including Amazon.com and Bookshop.org.
Oh my God, it's the coolest thing ever. Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? Well, check this out. It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic, famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. Seriously. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
Let's turn to the shrubs, and we have a plethora of native shrubs that are mainly berry producing. So let's start off with elderberry, one of my favorites.
Elderberry is probably one that most people are familiar with. It's an easy grower, especially if you have some moist soil, because it's naturally found along stream banks or wet areas. But that doesn't mean you can't grow it if you have dry soil, because I've grown them just fine in my well-drained, shaly clay soil.
Mm-hmm.
But they get a beautiful white flower in the spring, and I've seen people even fry the flowers up and make elderberry flower fritters, so you can eat those. And then if you don't eat the flowers, then you get the little elderberries later in the season, and that does have some known like antiviral properties, which is why you buy elderberry syrup at the grocery store and you take it when you have a cold or things, and it helps relieve some of those symptoms.
Yeah, and we had a herbalist talk all about elderberries in one of our past episodes of Garden DC, so I'll attach that link in the show notes for learning all about elderberry uses. So let's move on to the American hazelnut, and I'm a huge chocolate and hazelnut fan, but this is a little slightly different, our Corylus americana.
Yeah, so this is it's one of our native nuts, and we actually have a lot of native nuts. You know, we have black walnuts, we have some of our hickories, there's all different things. But this is more of a shrubby nut, which I like because it fits into a lot of smaller scale gardens. And it's a smaller hazelnut, what you get from it. So it's a nice one to try. Again, if you have squirrels, you may not see much of anything, unfortunately. But I do like it because it gets a really nice flower. It's green, but it's just an interesting shape. It's just a conversation starter.
And so true, Wendy. I have never gotten a nut from mine.
I know.
Just heavy squirrel population here in our urban area. They go crazy for it.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that's one of the problems when you get into some of these berry and nut producing plants, because the wildlife are just like, yeah, you planted those for me. So, but it's good to share. And I always say, well, then plant one more and maybe you'll get some out of it too.
Yep. Or just stay ever vigilant.
Yes.
So next is our spice bush, Lindera, I think it's benzoin.
Yep, Lindera benzoin. And this has a couple different uses that I've seen. I like to make a tea out of the leaves, and it's not a spicy tea necessarily. It's a little sweeter compared to even your Monardas and your Pycnanthemum teas. But that's a fun thing to do. And I've also seen the berries used in chutneys and different salsas and things like that. So the berry is edible. I've seen them, and I've tried it one time, not terribly successful, but I've infused vodka with some of the stems from the spice bush, and it gives an interesting taste. I think I might have let it in there a little too long, but that's a fun thing to do with some of these, is to make infusions with with vodka, especially because doesn't really have a flavor. And then you can spice it up with your elderberries or your spice bush or whatever you have.
Good idea.
Yep.
So let's go on to some of the fruit-bearing shrubs. So we have blueberry and beach plum and currant. Of course, there are other currants, but of course we're talking about natives here.
Right. So blueberries are easy. All of our blueberries are native to the Mid-Atlantic and East Coast area, whether it's high bush, low bush. So you might have a cultivar to get bigger fruit, but they were all originally from this area, so they were just selections made. Beach plum is a great large shrub, and it actually makes these little plums that are probably large marble size, and I've seen people make jellies out of those and different things, but here again, the squirrels go after mine religiously. So it's lovely. It gets a beautiful white flower in the spring. It reminds me of a peach tree almost, but it's in that plum family, just the way it holds the flowers. And then you get these little fruits late summer. And it's quite nice. And it's not large. That's the other thing that's very nice. But you do need two. And I didn't mention that with a lot of these fruit-producing woody plants. It's very helpful, and you get better production if you have at least two.
And those would be two different? Could
Well,
they be
that's where
in the same family?
Varies. Yeah, it depends on the plant. Like with blueberries, you can have two of the exact same cultivars, and it's okay. If you have another cultivar, sometimes that can improve it even more. With the beach plums, because those are generally, I haven't seen a lot of cultivars available of those, you're dealing with straight species. So as long as you have two plants, you're good. Now, when we get to Paws, that's a little bit different yet. So it's very specific to the plant itself on, whether you need different varieties or not.
Yeah, and I have seen beach plum used ornamentally, kind of limbed up into a small tree. And you're right,
yes.
It's just a beautiful plant, even if you get no fruit off of it.
Right. Exactly. The nice thing with that, too, is the name beach plum comes along coastal areas. That's where it was originally found. So it can take some salt spray, which is very common, in a lot of our areas right now. The issue with that is you would want to be careful if you're eating them. I don't know what kind of effects that salt, especially road salt in your soil, could have on the fruit. But as far as just a garden plant that can tolerate that, beach plum was an excellent option.
Good advice.
Yeah.
And then we were on to the currants.
Yeah, so the currants, those are tougher to find, I'll have to admit. A lot of these are more the black currants, are the native ones. And when I was growing these probably 10 years ago, it was very challenging to find them. Mail order was the only source, and I never got mine far enough to get enough fruit. If you can find them, I think they're worth trying, just like the currants that you would purchase from any of your fruit tree growers. They're not going to produce a ton. They're small fruit, so you'd need a lot to do anything with them. They are going to be more tart. But for jellies and jams and things like that, you can combine them with other things and they can add an interesting flavor.
Mm-hmm. And then, is it chinquapin or
chinkapin?
Chinkapin.
Mm-hmm. So this is in the chestnut family. And while we've had chestnut blight, and this is still susceptible to chestnut blight, the difference is that this is a shrubby chestnut, and it'll keep sending up shoots from the roots. So if some of the shoots grow and they get blight and die back, as long as your root is still healthy, it'll send up new branching. And unlike the chestnut tree, which has to get fairly aged to get any chestnuts out of it, these new sprouts will fruit a lot quicker. So even if you have blight in your area and you suffer some dieback, you still could very likely get some chinkapin nuts from it. So this is another smaller, large shrub, small tree kind of thing. I've gotten just a handful. I made the mistake one year. I got some seed from somebody and thought I'd start a bunch of these and plant them in my little orchard on my property. Well, the squirrels could sense them from a mile away, and they dug them all up. And I didn't even think about putting wire mesh over it. That was my bad. And I lost 100 seeds that year. So they're going to definitely rob those if you have them. But it's a fun little plant. And if you want that nostalgia of having a chestnut on your property, it's a nice one to try.
Yeah, and if your intention is to share with the wildlife or to support wildlife, go for it.
There you go. That's right. That's right.
So next in the shrub category is New Jersey tea, and that's TEA, like drinking tea.
Right. So this is another one. It's grown commercially. You can find it fairly easily as a just ornamental native plant. It's a small shrub, and it gets a beautiful white flower in the summer. But you can use the leaves and make a tea out of it. But it's a great pollinator plant aside from that, because it's always covered with insects when it's in bloom. And it gets some nice fall color with some good yellows and occasional orangey reds. But it's a smaller woody plant. So if you have a small space and good drainage, it likes it hot and dry. It's a great one to use. And then you get the added bonus if you want to try making tea out of the leaves.
Well, let's round up our native edibles discussion with a few trees. So first is, of course, Serviceberry, which are going to be fruiting soon.
Mm-hmm.
And I think many people are familiar with them just as an ornamental plant in their garden.
That's right. This is probably the number one that's the easiest to find, because this is a great landscape plant. It's used a lot in the trade. It's always readily available. It's a nice small tree the size of a dogwood, and mine just got done blooming. They have a white flower in early spring. They don't last long because the petals are so delicate. You get one windstorm or one heavy rain and it knocks them all off. But after that, you get these lovely little fruit about the size of a blueberry. They're kind of reddish purple, and they kind of have like an almond aftertaste because of the seeds in them, but they're great to eat. I've made pies out of them. I've made jellies out of them. We just eat them, right off the tree. Even my dog loves them. He'll literally jump up at the branches and pick them off, gobble them off the tree. It's so funny. But you do have to watch. The birds will pick these off. So just like the birds come in and will clean off your blueberry plants, they can do that with a serviceberry. The difference is there's so many more fruit on a serviceberry that generally there's some for everybody.
Yeah, but, and some are out of reach for us.
That's right.
Unless you get on a ladder. So
right.
those are the birds, and the ones we can reach are ours.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Now, one word of caution with this, and whether you're using it for ornamental or for edible, serviceberries, if there are junipers nearby, when you have those two plants together, they are host plants for cedar apple rust. And so occasionally you can get these little fruits that look like aliens invaded them and they have all these orange tentacles coming out. Don't eat them when they get that. That's just the fruiting fungal spores, coming to fruition. Mm-hmm. But if you have that kind of a problem, if you can remove the junipers, that can help reduce that. There really isn't any other treatment other than not having the two hosts nearby.
Yeah, and I haven't found any area where there's not juniper right near the serviceberry. And
right.
I always call that the Cheeto effect. Like, you just get that orange dust fungus, and at that point, it's done for the season.
That's right. And it's not going to kill the tree. It makes it unappealing, but you'll still have plenty of other fruit. It doesn't affect everything. But just be aware. If you see it, your tree's not dying. It just means you have a juniper nearby.
Mm-hmm. And so for our last two fruit trees, the pawpaw and persimmon, we've done past episodes of GardenDC, which again, I'll link in our show notes. And persimmon in particular, we did a whole show on that with the late Stanton Gill. But
okay.
I did want to bring up, you had the point about pawpaw and how you need more than one.
Yes. So pawpaws are a great tree for the landscape. Wildlife loves them. People have this infatuation with them because they just have such a short fruiting window. And I've been involved with pawpaw festivals, and it brings like thousands of people in a weekend. But with those, you need two separate genetics. That's a little different than some of our other trees. And the reason they say that is because pawpaws are known to sucker. So it's not uncommon in the wild to see this big, beautiful clump of pawpaws, and you have lots of stems, and without knowing much about them, you would think, oh, these are all different trees, but they're all coming from the same rootstock. So they're all the same genetics. And what happens is you get these stands then that don't fruit. So what I've heard from a lot of people who are really watching these and studying them is you want 2 different genetics, meaning you want from 2 different seeds. So you need 2 separate plants. Or if you purchase some of the cultivars, which are actually very worthwhile in pawpaw land. The cultivars are selected for a reason, and if you're going to eat them, I would strongly recommend going that route. But as long as you have 2 different cultivars, then you're fine. So I generally go through and I trim all my suckers just to keep it a little cleaner looking, because they will quickly, once you have a happy pawpaw, they will fill in and form a nice dense stand. And to not get fruit out of all that is kind of disappointing. But with pawpaws, you have to watch. I was involved with a pawpaw fest and never could understand why after we finished the event, my stomach would just be upset for like a week. And then we put 2 and 2 together, and they can cause some stomach upset if you eat too much. Well, we were preparing all these things for tastings, ice cream and cupcakes and different things, and sampling all these things we were making, and that was making us sick. So again, you want to do things in moderation. I've heard some really funny stories, they're great when they're in season. You want to enjoy them as much as you can. And someone made daiquiris out of them and was drinking daiquiris all weekend, and then couldn't leave their house for a while because it got the better of them.
Yeah, I think I've heard it described as a diuretic, and that is a little warning right there.
Yeah. So, no, they're fun because it's just such an unusual flower. They are unique. You either love the taste or you don't. My family is not a big fan of them, even though we have about a dozen on our property. So we donate them usually to causes that can use them. But yeah, some people just are all about it. We'll freeze them and do all kinds of things, but you can make a lot. It does change the taste a little bit whenever you bake with a pawpaw. I think if you use it fresh, it's better, but one of my favorite ways, and the only way right now I'll eat them, are to make pawpaw popsicles. And I'll share a quick little recipe. You puree, you pick all the seeds out, you get rid of the skins because you don't eat the seed or the skin. And you mash it all up or put it in a blender so it's nice and smooth. And then you get either pear juice or apple juice and pour that in to make it a little thinner. And then I like to put a little bit of rum in it. And then I freeze them and make popsicles. And you can buy these nice little Ziploc bags on Amazon that make these little freeze pop pouches. They're like 1 inch wide by 12 inches long. And they're great. You just walk around in this fall with your little pawpaw popsicle, and it's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. And listeners, I have had one of Wendy's pawpaw popsicles, so I can attest to the yumminess, and especially, as you say, on a hot summer day is a great treat. And it's just a little bit, just enough to have that pawpaw flavor and not go overboard and have that stomach ache or anything. Right. And for those who have never tried a pawpaw before, we're going to describe it as kind of banana-y, kind of in that category, but, with a little more tropical overtone, I think.
Right. Yep. That's pretty much it.
So, Wendy, how can our listeners contact you to find out more?
Well, you can find me at Cavanos Perennials, and our website is Cavanos, which is CAVANOS.com. We're normally a wholesale perennial nursery, but we are open select weekends this spring. So our next big weekend is going to be May 9th and 10th at the nursery, which is in Kingsville, Maryland, just outside of Baltimore. So you can look it up on that. And the cool thing with that weekend is we are doing a foodscaping emphasis. So we will have some of these native edibles as well as some of the other non-native edibles that are perennial that come back every year available for sale.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Wendy, for sharing all about native edible plants. And any last thoughts on your edible native garden journey?
Yeah, I say don't be afraid to try things. But I say that with any gardening journey. If something sounds appealing, try one, see what happens. And you don't have to like everything once you put it in the ground. And it's okay if something dies. It happens. But that's how you learn. And I think that's part of just the gardening experience in general.
So true. Thank you, Wendy.
Thanks for having me.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
In the book The Urban Garden by Kathy Jentz and Terry Spate, you'll find dozens of inspiring and creative ways to grow flowers, shrubs, vegetables, herbs, and other plants in small spaces and with a limited budget. Whether you want to grow on a balcony, rooftop, front stoop, or a tiny urban patio, turn your growing dreams into reality and build a gorgeous and unique garden that showcases your personal style while still being functional and productive. With the genius ideas and resourceful tactics found here, you'll be maximizing yields and beauty from every square inch of your space. No matter what you grow, the 101 amazing growing ideas found in the urban garden will turn your tiny urban yard into a treasure trove of green you'll be proud to share with family and friends. Buy your copy today at your local retail bookseller or order it online now at Amazon.com or bookshop.org.
Canva presents your work horoscope for this week. Deadlines are in retrograde, which we all know can bring some intense energy. Our advice: fend off this forecast with Canva. Like Canva whiteboards to counter creative blocks, and Canva docs for clarity in communications. If you have any sales deals coming through, results will be in your favor with Canva presentations, manifesting many wins for you. It's a great week to love your work at canva.com.
Basket of Gold, Plant Profile. Basket of Gold, Aurelia saxatilis, is an evergreen perennial with a long period of bloom. Its bright yellow flowers can last for 4 to 6 weeks in mid-spring. It's also known as golden alyssum, madwort, and golden tuft. It's native to Europe and is a member of the mustard family. It's hardy to USDA zones 3 to 7. It attracts butterflies and is a nectar source for other beneficial insects as well. It's also deer-resistant. Basket of Gold prefers to grow in full sun in well-draining soils and is drought-tolerant once established. It is low care. Simply shear it back after the flowers fade and be careful not to over-fertilize it. Basket of Gold is low-growing, so it's a good choice for containers, rock gardens, and in the front of garden beds. You can propagate it by sowing seeds in the early spring or by dividing it in the fall. Basket of Gold, you can grow that. What's new in the garden this week? Well, my Spanish bluebells are blooming and I'm enjoying the flowers on the beautiful dogwood trees. Over at the community garden plot, our cool season leafy greens and herbs are coming along nicely, and my thornless blackberry is in full flower, which I hope means tons of fruits for me later on. In the garden tips that we shared this week on our social media, we advised that certain plants are notoriously late to show life and are always the last to leaf out in the spring, it seems, so don't give up on them prematurely. Those include oaks, rose of Sharon, crepe myrtle, mimosa, Kentucky coffee tree, black gum tree, figs. And if you're wondering if a woody plant is alive or dead, you can scratch a bit of the bark with your fingernail, and if you see green underneath, there's still life left. In local gardening events, if you're in the Washington, D.C. area, you might want to attend the Bonsai Festival weekend on Friday, May 9th through Sunday, May 11th. The National Arboretum and the Potomac Bonsai Association are celebrating World Bonsai Day with that weekend-long festival. Activities include free demonstrations and styling presentations, workshops for all skill levels, and that's at the National Bonsai and Penyang Museum at the U.S. National Arboretum. There will be vendors who will have lots of bonsai-related things for sale as well, and you can check that out at the National Arboretum's website. And then on Saturday, May 10th, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., the Silver Spring Garden Club is having their annual plant sale fundraiser, Garden Mart, at Brookside Gardens in Wheaton, Maryland. There will be tomatoes, peppers, various veggies, and herbs for sale, including annual plants and also perennials from members' gardens. Then on the following weekend, Saturday, May 17th and Sunday, May 18th, from 1 to 5 each day, is the Beyond the Garden Gates Garden Tour in Frederick, Maryland. To purchase tickets to that, you can go to celebratefrederick.com. You can take a peek behind garden gates of 10 public and private gardens in Frederick during this annual garden tour. Happy gardening!
This is Christy Page with Green Prince with the last word on Playing with Frost, a story by Pat Stone. Normal people, that means non-gardeners, think of the rest of us, that means gardeners, as sweet little old ladies with sun hats and flower skirts, humming elevator hits to ourselves as we putter placidly among our plants. Nothing could be further from the truth. Oh, sure, we may look like the next-door Joneses of suburbia, but inside we're the Indiana Joneses of the home front, rolling dice against the most merciful foe of all, mean old Ma Nature. Now, I'm not kidding, just look. We toy with frost the way the progeny of pyromaniacs play with matches. The first balmy spell of Indian spring hits and whammo, we're popping pepper plants in the ground or setting out trays of tender ornamentals. Sure, it's a little early. Yes, our official frost-free date is close to a month away, but feel that sun, smell that air. Let's go, sisters. It's time to plant. That night on the news? Well, that's all the murders, rapes, stabbings, and Elvis sightings for today. Nick, what's happening with weather? Terry, it looks like tricky Mr. Mercury is going to dip down to 28 degrees tonight. That means all you normal people might want to, well, maybe shut your windows before you go to bed. But all you gardeners out there, you're in big trouble. He's right. In a flash, we're up from our seats, dumping trash cans, stripping beds, pouring milk down the drain and rushing outside. Thump, a can over the salvias. Foomp, a blanket over the begonias. Plop, 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 a deep-bottomed milk carton over every tomato. Next morning, when the tardy fingers of that treacherous sun finally melt the frost, we tally up the casualties and set about searching for replacements. Replacements which we set right into the ground, cueing Ma Nature to do it all over again. Now, the way I see it, you normal people, watching TV, reading the paper, maybe playing a board game with the kids, you're the placid, non-adventurous types. When it comes to spring, frost gardeners are Amelia Earharts, Evel Knievels, backyard Bonnies and Clydes, and we've got the scars from 1,000 Gambles Lost to prove it. This has been the last word from Christy Page at greenprince.com.
Thank you for listening to Garden DC. You can become a listener supporter for as little as 99 cents a month by going to the supporter link in our show notes or directly to podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/GardenDC/support. Another way to support this podcast is to subscribe to our monthly digital publication, Washington Gardener Magazine. To do so, go to WashingtonGardener.com or WashingtonGardener.blogspot.com. You can find Washington Gardener on social media at WDC Gardener on Twitter or X, Instagram, and Pinterest, and on Facebook at Washington Gardener Magazine. And be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Please take a minute to share us on social media with hashtag GardenDC so other gardeners can find us too.